Hi, my name is John Scarley. This is episode number 2. In case you're wondering what the connection between a $3 washer and the donation before he went to the Philippines and his Botox treatment, certainly circumstantial evidence suggests he had Botox as well. This is Hoss. I'll put the connection together, and most people, 96%, those are 4% are psychopaths, would probably agree with him. The other 90% will find it absolutely disgusting and will show you that actions speak louder than words, and the psychopath, their actions do not match their words. And in terms of me being homeless, and I said Hoss hasn't paid for it, I have at least designed and built my own home, and I had it paid off for. And you can see the poor condition in the black and white photo. So the guy knocked off $50,000. It was worth $600,000. And I designed and built it, as I say, and it was even in the brochure of Monia for 25 years. I designed it specifically to make it look small. And I did all that with back-breaking work, etc. Hoss has never, ever, ever owned a house in his own right. Yes, he bought some houses to impress his father-in-law to make it look like he owned houses to make it look like he didn't have wasn't a gold digger. But in reality, he hasn't even bought a small house like that out of his own money, not even a bloody doghouse. Yeah, I learned to drive in this ute, but there was a much better ute that his ex-wife's brother sent to Alice Springs when he was up there, just like I sent money and all my power tools and stuff with a promise to Sandy as well about giving it back when he's finished returning it. He never did get it back. That was 30 years ago, and I know Sandy's intelligence is 10 to 20 times, not 20 points, but 20 times higher than Hoss's, so he wouldn't be holding his breath. But the handshake, I'll go into the details there. That was while I was waiting for the council. They'd already told me they were giving me the job. I just had to wait for a letter, etc. And I'll go into that. But I used to tell the guy across the road I'd rather have been born 50 years early where you could win a handshake. Now, about 40, give or take a couple of the people that I looked after at the hospital were women who had been abused, terribly abused. And when I told them I went to protect my mother, when I told them about the 4 fights that I've had, when I told them that even my sister-in-law, ugly, I protected her when I found out she started getting hit. She got engaged to a guy she didn't even know, and after they got engaged, 6 weeks after they'd thing, I'm going to fill in all the details later, including the fact they couldn't even add up 2 and 2 then, and 30 years later they still couldn't add up 2 and 2. 7 times I took flowers. If it wasn't 7, it was bloody 6 at least. And I took flowers, and I heard the same story. Oh, look, he's brought me flowers for the first time. Guess what? After 7 times, I stopped bloody taking flowers. The guy who was on the park bench, Roy, it wasn't him there in the photo, but I put him on, and about a year or 2 later, he asked me to put on another guy, and I did. And then he asked me to put another guy who was a Maori, and I did. And sadly, he got killed about 2 or 3 months after he bought the bike. And he bought the bike because he had a job with me. And don't judge a book by its cover. Oh boy, if there's ever a true story, there's one there. I'll go into details later. But Roy never had a car. He was homeless. I got him into a boarding home, straightened his life out, and he bought that Valiant similar to that, the S-Series. And then after 6 months or 9 months, he thought it was expensive, so he bought himself a bike as well. And I told him, no, don't. And sadly, him and a third guy that he asked me to put on, who was also homeless, but he'd only been started with me on a Monday, on the Friday, the 22nd of July, around about midnight, just before midnight, they both got killed in front of the Royal Adelaide Hospital by the traffic lights. I wait and do a right-hand turn into East Terrace. And I'll go into the full details of that later. But he used to call me Dad, and that was just after my second child when he got killed. And the other guy, I only knew him for about a week, but it was so sad. It was almost like losing one of my own. But when I was on that building with the truck out the front, actually before that, when the council guy asked me to meet him down there and have a look at it if I would take over the project, I said, don't recommend me for any more work because I'm getting out. I can't handle the physical pain. It's just too much. Well, there's a long discussion and trying to talk me out of it, and then he come back a week later and offered me a job in the council as Technical Officer Heritage. And eventually I took it on a bit reluctantly. I'll go into reasons why. But I created 2 policies during that thing, and I'll get into both policies. One was graffiti that they asked me to handle about 6-8 months after I started, and the other one was heritage incentives, and I'll go into that. While I was with the council and also later, the ex ran 3 times into a bloody door in the roller door. Why each time? She was in a hurry to go and pick her mother up because she was demanding to be brought over to the house by the lake instead of staying at Swan Terrace, the delusional frickin' devil. And I taught Daniel and Laura to tie their shoelaces when I was with the council, and I realised she wasn't doing it. And she got by the corner of that table that was there, and she goes crook at me. And I tried to explain to her 40, 50 times over the next few years why she should teach the kids. I wanted them to be independent, and I'd tell you why later. But I started getting out of the council at the end of my initial contract because they didn't give me an extension, although the guy from the council said, yeah, come back. And I said, no, I said in writing that I've got to get out, finish on the 30th of June. A friend of a friend had this place that you saw there with Quick Lube on there. He said, you can use that to try your new business venture that you want to try, free of charge, rent-wise. But it's only temporary because he's going to bulldoze it down. He's waiting for council approval to put about 8 or 9 units on there, or condos. Anyway, I went back to the council because they give me a writing, and then they wanted me to lie in 2 reports, and I refused to do so. I resigned, and so eventually I did start up this business, but I had less time because the council approved it a few months later. It was very successful, and I had to move, and that's where Hoss cost me $70,000, and I'll go into the details later. And despite being in a lot of debt, you can see by that last letter from the Commonwealth Bank, that letter was to the ex because she was a company director and secretary, and she says she knew nothing about anything in the affidavits later. She was a company director and secretary for the whole period. But I did get a job with EasyBuild after a while, and before I went to EasyBuild, I was out of work for about 6 weeks, and I went on to the dole while I was waiting for a job. And I'll tell you, there's an unbelievable story connection with that and her mother embezzling for 5 frickin' years from Centrelink, and she had no kids to support. She had no cars to run. She had nothing to pay in expenses, and she still bloody embezzled them for 5 years. But I went to Ballarat, this was Shepparton, and even the ugly came with me because she was always hanging on, and I was paying her bloody expenses as well. And there was a lady called Rosa. She had 4 kids like us, and she went back to work, and all the devil and evil were saying, can't go to work, and the ex was saying, don't know how she does it. Well, I used to say, I'll tell you how she does it. But no, she didn't want to know. And I started thinking, because of all the crazy things, yes, she's the intent to marry me was evil, just like her mother knocked on Joe's door to steal his pension. But Judas is a saint compared to my ex. Trader is not even begin to describe the backstabbing, etc. And many times, even in the late 80s, as I say, what the frickin' hell's wrong with you? I never said it to her. I used to mentally say it. And to get her working, get away from her mother, I even bought a machine saying she wouldn't go to work to actually do anything. And I end up buying that machine so we can do some T-shirts for the school. And we did about 400 altogether. But I had to bloody do it as well as working and everything else because she was 2 things. The only thing she did was iron them the next day. Yeah, she ironed them the next day, but I had to do all the printing at night and everything else. But that gave her time to go gambling, and you wonder why my bloody life was out of kilter in terms of work hours. And despite all the work hours and running 2 businesses, I made sure I had time to get involved with the kids, not only in the school, being on the parents and friends and in the kindy earlier, but I took his fishing, I took his circuses and everything else. And Laura, you didn't talk for the first 2 or 3 months at school, and going fishing was what broke the ice. And I told your mother how to solve the problem, but she couldn't solve it. And your ugly auntie wouldn't have this. Look at the bloody receipt earlier. Excuse me. You know, didn't have the bloody brains. And her comment when I first started telling her about 5 years before we actually bought it, her comment to me was unfrickin' believable. Shows you how stupid and how dumb they are. The whole clan are amongst the 0.0001% of the lowest intelligence in the world. And when this guy, he took over as chairman of the committee at the school, the day he rang me up after sending me that letter a few weeks earlier was the day I was absolutely paralysed. I try to teach your mother teamwork. And, you know, by when the crows come in to try to say, we're supposed to be a team, we work together, we can achieve a lot more. But no, she was also, what will people think? She said that about 500 times in the marriage, including when you kids were small. She said it often. And I said, I don't care what other people think. If I'm not doing anything wrong, I don't give a damn, you know. But anyway, this particular last letter was from somebody, and when I rang her up, because I'd never heard of her, she screamed when I put my name in, and I'll tell you why later. But there was one occasion that I could have hit the devil, who thinks she's the queen. I'll admit it, there was one occasion, but some of the people at the hospital said they would have hit her, including the women. Anyway, you know, show you, I ran the business of restoring old buildings, all the heavy work there, and I just kept thinking, what's wrong with you? Why won't you go to work? You're saying you want to go to work, but you don't want to go, you know, actions speak louder than words, you know, her words do not match her actions. Yeah, I'm having a bit of fun there with a sign up on the roof, somebody's birthday in America, friends of ours. But this is the second business I was running, and that was building industrial sheds, or was trying to sell industrial sheds, etc. But I couldn't do both with all the extra work. The evil bitch didn't even do the bloody typing for me. You know, I had to do everything, including running her sister's house and doing everything. As I say, they would not have that house if it hadn't been for me. Not only were they too stupid, she wouldn't have been able to borrow 1 cent. But I was there for your sports days and everything else. I made sure I had time to make time. And there's the lady who did my typing. You can see she even had to sign letters for me because I didn't have time to scratch myself. I had no personal time for myself whatsoever. And there's a carport I did down at Woodville, not too far from where you live now, Laura. I even had to do the pest control. She worked 1 week a bloody month, the ugly, and she couldn't even bloody make a phone call to get the pest people down there. And even when the roller door had to be replaced, guess who did it? Yeah, you can see there, it's my name, my company name, and Fairford Terrace. It's her house. But I had to bloody do everything. Too dumb, too stupid to even do that. And this guy, I restored this house. He was Deputy Prime Minister of Australia for a short while. And there's his letter. It's one of the greatest letters I've got. While I rubbed the name out, because earlier I was going to keep it all confidential, but obviously we can't now. And that last picture of Government House looking down at some horses, they were police horses. On that day, I was the only one that was absolutely clear and totally honest in terms I could walk out of that place without anybody having suspicions. I'll go into the details later. But as a kid, Mum had 6 brothers and 5 sisters, and 3 of the brothers were here in Adelaide. And oh boy, we used to. That was a great times. You know, apart from the beatings, and that made up for it. Getting together with the cousins a lot of times was for work as well, but. Anyway, my back, when I said a chiropractor earlier, I had one chiropractor. He saw me at a job walking up and down, and he pulled me over and said, oh, excuse me, you've got a crook back, haven't you? And I thought, well, how in the hell do you know? And anyway, he was my first chiropractor for about 10, 12 years until he went to Sydney. And that's where Jim Madigan, I said earlier, when I was paralysed, I didn't have one for about 5 or 6 years, and I went to 4 chiropractors before actually getting the 4th one, who was Jim, and he fixed me up. He used to do the basketballers. But in my teens, I went out and worked for 3 seasons out at Willunga for a guy called Max Herriot. And my second season there, he put me in charge of a tractor and gave me $1 an hour, which was a full adult wage. And so I left at Easter time with the intention of working a full 28 days there. And I did 320 hours in that 28 days away from, which included the Easter break, away from the normal work I had through the week. But while I was there, I saw the kids had nothing to do, and I was only 17. That was my last of the 3 years there. I arranged for Daryl, Cotton and the Zoot as one of their first jobs, and they went on to much bigger and better things later. And I had a dance in the local thing. I didn't know how to do it, but hey, I'm going to give this a go, give the kids something to do. The ute, the green ute you just saw, yeah, I'll get into that in a minute. But that's where I taught another guy, Dominic T, to stand up for his rights after some guy was pushing him around, being bullied. And I wasn't going to tolerate it, and I taught him a lot of things. And once I taught him and things happened, well, that tall guy who was about 12 inches taller than Dominic never bloody picked on him again. At the Shell service station, that was the second time I was supposed to have saved somebody's life, and I had to cut the guy upside down from the car, and it was a medical intern. It was a mini miner, and I'll go into the full story later, but when the AMBO called me a hero, I said, no way in the world. The heroes are the guys that go to war. I just did what was right because I was there at the time, like happens virtually every day of the year around the place somewhere or another, and you see it on TV all the time. But I've been offered lots of jobs. One of them, there's guys fighting. I'll get into that. That was when I went to protect a friend and I got involved and they all turned on me. And luckily I did all that hard work and I was bloody lot stronger than everybody else in those days, my age. And with Greg Chappell, he used to visit me along with Terry Jenner virtually every week for about 2 years. They used to be Coca-Cola reps. The car wash, I'll get into that. That's I'm probably the only guy in Australia that did protest against the protesters the uni protesters were protesting against the guys who were in Vietnam, and I did my protest against the protesters, and as I say, I'll get into that later. Billy Thorpe, he was fantastic. He used to visit me anytime he was in Adelaide. He used to walk in and grab a Coke and a drink, and we'd have a bit of a chat. I went to the Supreme Court. I was a bit stunned. I didn't know, but when I won a lower case with the Adelaide City Council, they appealed and went to the Supreme Court of South Australia, and I won in the Supreme Court against the lawyers, and I had no educational background, no nothing. When I ran for council, I was the first guy to push for a mall in Rundle Street, change it from a Rundle Street to Rundle Mall. And and then I went to see a guy called Jeff Virgo, Minister for Transport at the time, and he was sort of spitting. He spoke as if he was spitting at you. Yeah, no offence to the relatives, but I'm going to get onto that subject later on, including why I've got the photograph of Sepulveda there. But the girl you just saw, she's a Miss Australia. I was engaged, and obviously to be Miss Australia, she's got to be a 10 out of 10. Well, I got engaged to somebody who was a bloody 15. She gave up a modelling job in Sydney and she used to help me out every bloody morning on the milk round and other things. Anyway, I'm going to get onto that later on because your mother is so frickin' evil. And why was Tony in that photograph with Daniel? Because she was in the paper about the time that Anthony was born. But yeah, why have I got? Yeah, I did bar work as well. I did work in the early mornings at the East End markets at the time. I worked at a place called Jeremiah's as a bouncer Friday nights, Hotel Enfield out at Globe Derby Park. These are all jobs that were offered. I never bloody applied for any of them. Sorry, I applied for the one at the East End market. I painted these big, massive trucks. The dead body, the thing on the ground, I found somebody in the corner, Byron Place and Franklin Street, and I'll get into that later. And I don't even remember what year because I blocked it out for many years. And then when I went back there with the guy where I was at earlier, and he didn't believe me initially when I sort of reversed back. And with all the bad luck that I'd had, I was thinking, I'm going to get the blame for this woman being dead in the middle of the road. But then when we walked back with the other guy, we saw the guy that had killed her, and the scene was absolutely horrific. Yeah, I designed kitchens, and I got 3 of my kitchens with no training into national magazines. I got a few thank you letters, and I got so much bloody publicity locally as being the best designer in South Australia. Do what's right. There's a area there where it says something about people get involved, and after going to dinner at Don and Claudia's place in Melbourne, I got dropped back off at the hotel, and there was a big argument with some guy wanted to attack and screaming and yelling and swearing while 8 or 9 people stood back 10 metres away. They're all scared of him. But I went up to him and told him to shut up because of make it my business, because there was a grandmother there, or great-grandmother, with a 5-year-old, and he was swearing and carrying on. I did the right thing in all sorts of areas. Uni SA, where you see all that stuff before Daniel's photo, I'll get into that. But if it wasn't for knowing Sir Eric Neal, yeah, we donated a lot of that stuff that had to be destroyed, stuff that was almost brand new. Super Sid, oh boy, you know, I wanted him down for a barbecue. Your mother wouldn't have it. And why is my mother holding you, Daniel? That's quickly because the other grandmother, the devil, never once held you. She didn't give a shit about you. Not once held you, not once tried to teach you anything, not once tried to do anything that 99% of grandmothers try to do. But she stood in the corner of that kitchen swearing and carrying on. I'm going to skip through because obviously I'm a lot behind. I'll get into every detail why I've got that. I've had a very hectic and busy life. You get out and enjoy life. But the whole clan that I married into, I didn't know. It was all pretend. I was so frickin' lazy. And when your mother finally arranged a meeting at Relationships Australia in October of 2004, she said 2 things which the woman got shocked as well. Oh, no. We don't do anything. John's the doer. And as if I'm to blame for doing things while they sat at home watching Days of Our Lives, gambled. Yeah, they're like a pig. You put lipstick on it, but guess what? In the end, they're still a frickin' pig. And my 50th birthday, I'll get into that one later, and everything else. And going into the third one, but yeah, all they did was backstab. They backstabbed one another. How frickin' stupid and bloody thing. Frickin' believable. And they want to blame me? Oh, they're crazy, the whole lot. Now I understand all the crazy things. I knew narcissist, but I never associated the delusion with being a psychopath. Now I understand, and that's 100%, 1,000,000% accurate.